I see a lot of celebrations of Lula in the chat, and I gotta say that I'm very happy. I am happy with this outcome. Now, there were a lot of, let's just say, those forces who, uh, there's a lot of forces out there who are kind of embracing MAGA, and there was a lot of conversation about how Bolsonaro, that a couple of years before that. So Brazil has gone through a lot of political turmoil. The Bolsonaro era is over for now. He is gone. He was an austerity president. He was a president of big business, of capital, and now he is gone. There was a lot of people talking about how existential this was, especially in regards to climate change. But I think overall, the significance is that now Brazil will get back to moving leftward, moving in a socialist direction, moving in a direction that's beneficial for workers. That is the politics of Lula da Silva. And of course, it's not without its complexities. I've said it on this channel. Lula da Silva is going to govern in what is a very complex governance situation. It isn't like Brazil is Cuba. Brazil is not China, right? Brazil has contradictions within its governance system. Even when Lula was president, despite all of the gains that ordinary working class people in Brazil made, there were still many contradictions, right? There were many issues that had yet to be resolved. And this hopefully is a step in the right direction toward facing some of those contradictions. And I think that given Lula's speech, I was listening to some of it, what could be made out. Cashapp News was airing it on their live stream, and it seems like he is focused on improving the standard of living of working class people in Brazil, of poor people in Brazil, and of addressing the environment, and of addressing the really making Brazil a key player in what is a fast changing and very dangerous global situation right now, with US hegemony and unipolar imperialism on the decline. So you have all of that on the table, and that's the significance of this election in sum. It is about not just some pink tide, not just bringing back the left in South America, but it's about really bringing forth the socialist politics of Latin America, and of course, bringing the global situation in a more stable direction and in the direction of peace. That is the significance here. It's a very big deal. And so all of those who are saying Bolsonaro somehow represented some kind of positive nationalistic trend, that's hogwash. Bolsonaro is of the military dictatorship. He was, in my estimation, more dangerous than Donald Trump, in the sense that his politics were much more clearly supported by the overall oligarchy, not just in Brazil, but this global capitalist oligarchy. He represented one of the most vicious forms, vicious expressions of this kind of rule. And it's a great thing that it has come to an end for now, right? Because we know that there's going to be calls for this election not to be recognized by his forces. But we also know that politics in South America, especially in Brazil, are complex. And people like Bolsonaro just don't go away, because the oligarchy is not going to go away overnight. That's not the kind of program that we have right now. So I wanted to, sorry. So let's get into the significance of this a bit, okay? I'm just going to read a report about Lula winning in Telesur, and then I'll compare it to how The Guardian reported it. Then I want to talk about Lula as a politician, Lula, what he's done, what the significance of all of this is. I think that's really important here. So let me pull this up, because we want to get right to this. We want to cover these stories, and I'm looking out for the possibility of the special guest coming on to talk about all of this stuff, where we will definitely pivot if that should occur. So Lula is the new president of Brazil. So this was reported just a few hours ago. And it says, Brazil's former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, narrowly defeated incumbent Jair Bolsonaro in Sunday's runoff and was elected head of state for the third time, confirmed the Superior Electoral Court. Election mathematically defined, the agency indicated on its website, noting that with 98.1% of the centers counted, or the votes, Lula is left with 50.83% of the votes against 49.17% for Bolsonaro. So Lula essentially won by just under 2%. More than 156 million Brazilians were summoned to choose this Sunday their next president between Bolsonaro and Lula, the most voted candidates in the first round on October 2nd. 12 states of the country elected their governor in the second round, and voting also took place in 181 centers installed abroad, which Lula, I think, got something ridiculous. I think he won like 90+% of those votes abroad, which is, to me, surprising. I've only, I grew up in the Boston area, in an area where there actually were quite a few Brazilian migrants. And let's just say they would never support Lula. I remember I worked with folks, and this is just how you know that there are real class contradictions in Brazil. I worked with multiple people from Brazil who lived in the United States, who lived in the city I was working in, and in the agency I was working in, and they celebrated when Lula went to jail. I remember when the sham trials were happening on Lula's corruption case, they were begging for him to get killed. I mean, this is how vitriolic the oligarchy can be. And I believe that they were of kind of like a landed class in Brazil, wealthy. They traveled back and forth. So anyway, all the main polls in Brazil for this Sunday's runoff showed the former president and leader in the Workers' Party, the PT Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, as a favorite of the president, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, this is the sixth time that leftist candidate Lula ran for president, while the far-right leader Bolsonaro sought re-election for the Liberal Party. The candidate elected today for a third term exercised his right to vote in São Bernardino de Campo, the cradle of the trade union movement in São Paulo. His hope was to make Sunday, October 30th, a historic day in Brazil, and it seems like he did. Last October 2nd, Lula won the first round, so I told you, but it was closer than expected. He didn't get the 50% needed to win in the first round. He got 48.43% and beat Bolsonaro in the first round by about 5%. So that's the report. Here's what The Guardian had to say, though. This is how you can tell there's a bias, right? And there's a lot of people saying, oh, the mainstream Western press, they love Lula. They love Lula. And I just want to say this about that. The mainstream Western corporate media does not love Lula. What they love is stability. And I do believe that there are some who think that Bolsonaro is too rogue, too vitriolic, and too much of an eyesore, kind of like Trump, but even worse in the sense that unlike Trump, who will kind of who was underestimated, I don't think anyone in the U.S. and Western political establishment underestimates someone like Bolsonaro, given his relationship to the dictatorship. They know this guy's serious and has a political background. So I do believe that there were some in the establishment who said, okay, we'll stomach Lula and we'll try to crush him from the inside and concede this. But I don't think that there was outright corporate media support and support from the political establishment. I don't believe that. I didn't see anything like that. And I just, to me, it's just, I think, a way of diverting the true importance, diverting people away from the true importance of what this all means. So Lula stages a comeback to beat far-right Bolsonaro in Brazil. Okay, they changed. Okay. The headline online put stunning comeback. Now they say astonishing comeback. So they changed it because initially it was stunning. And when I saw that word stunning, I was like, stunning comeback? What do you even mean? He was favored. But here's what they had to say. Brazil's former leftist president, Lula da Silva, has sealed an astonishing political comeback, beating far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro in one of the country's most significant and bruising elections in the country's history. So 99% of the votes were counted. He won 50.8% of the votes over Bolsonaro's 49.1%. A few streets away on Paulista Avenue, one of the city's main arteries, ecstatic Lula supporters gathered to celebrate his victory in the downfall of a radical right-wing president whose presidency produced an environmental tragedy and saw 700,000 Brazilians die of COVID. Our dream is coming true. We need to be freed. Joe Calif, a 62-year-old social activist who was among the elated throng. Brazil was in a very dangerous place, and now we are getting back to our freedom. The last 4 years have been horrible. Gabriele Soares, a 19-year-old student, jumped for joy as she commemorated the eminent victory of a leader whose social policies helped her achieve a university education. I feel so happy. During 4 years of Bolsonaro, I saw my family slip backwards, and under Lula, they flourished, she said, a rainbow banner draped over her shoulders. Ecstatic and tearful supporters of Lula, who secured more than 59 million votes over Bolsonaro's 57 million, hugged and threw cans of beers in the air. This means we are going to have someone in power who cares about those at the bottom. Right now, we have a person who doesn't care about the majority of us, about LGBT people. Bolsonaro is a bad person. He doesn't show a drop of empathy or solidarity for others. There is no way he can continue to be president. There was celebration around the region, too, as leftist allies tweeted their congratulations. Viva Lula, said Colombia's leader, Gustavo Petro. Argentina's president, Alberto Fernandez, celebrated a new era in Latin American history, an era of hope and of a future that starts right now. Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, Mexico's president, commemorated what he called a victory for equality and humanism. Outside of Bolsonaro's home, Western Rio, there was dejection and anger as the news sunk in. I'm angry, said Monique Almeida, a 36-year-old beautician. I don't know what to say. While Raiz, a 50-year-old electrician, said he was convinced the vote had been rigged. It's fraud without a doubt. They manipulated the count. The armed forces must intervene, he demanded. And if they didn't, the population must take to the streets to demand military intervention so we don't hand power over to the communists. So what's so striking about this article is that sounds pretty good, right? Sounds pretty good. The Guardian talks about all the workers and the ordinary people, the student, the worker, right? They love Lula because Lula improved their lives, and they didn't like bad Bolsonaro, and they even did the like he's for LGBTQ people, which is definitely a way to kind of trigger people's anger. So corporate media is all about trying to trigger people's anger, and so they think that if you put an LGBT in there, then that will, of course, trigger. Bad news is good media, like good. It gets clicks, it gets likes. They also, which shouldn't be the case, but that's the kind of culture war environment we live in, and I think it's ridiculous. But they also ended, right? So you had astonishing victory at the top. Astonishing? It was pretty much expected to be a tight race and one that Lula was slightly favored in. The worry for me was not that this would be an astonishing victory, but that there was suppression and foul play, and that there would be such a fear-mongering tactics from the oligarchy, the political establishment, the police, that would affect the outcome. That didn't happen, and that's great, or at least it didn't affect the outcome. However, astonishing is not the right word, but at the end, you see what they ended with? They ended with what they hope, and I know this is what they're thinking, is that, now, and the same thing has happened in other cases, right? Bolivia, for example, because, Luis Arce, when he won, when he won in 2020, what was that, the end of 2020, I believe it was, when he was reelected, when he was elected out of the coup regime that lasted for a little over for about a year, the Western political establishment didn't make too much of a fuss about it, right? They weren't like, oh my God, we can't recognize them. But that there's machinations happening behind the scenes. And I think even you can just sense it in the way this article is structured that, we're not going to say anything bad. And obviously there's good parts about Lula being elected now, but watch out. There are people who are hating the communists. They call Lula a communist, which is hilarious. And they're going to rebel. That was the end of the article. So not really what you would say is the, it's all about the craft. It's all about how things are constructed. It's not only about, is this bias or is it not bias? Is this providing a fair picture? How are these articles structured? Why would the conclusion be that, right? be the opposition and kind of give the last word to these anti-communist far-right forces that are probably going to mobilize against this in whatever way they can. I don't know how successful it will be. But I wanted to just show you some of that coverage because that's how it's going to be, I think, in the beginning. And we will see how the US and the Western political establishment, the imperialist establishment, respond to Lula's victory as things move along and as policy begins to take shape. Of course, that's not going to happen until the winter time because he doesn't take office until the winter time. So that's how the media covered it. And so it's great. Lula won. Uh, uh you know, Latin America is really, I think, having this resurgence of the left. You've seen it in the elections in Mexico, right? AMLO. You saw it in Argentina with Alberto Fernandez. You've seen it in Venezuela, actually strengthening the Bolivarian movement, the PSUV, the Socialist Party of Venezuela, gaining in strength and momentum. And actually now, as Camille Escalante was on this program talking about, has actually come out of a lot of the struggles of the sanctions. Still, they're there, but Venezuela has found a way by diversifying its economic portfolio around the world, as well as just conducting smart economic policy at home, geared toward the needs of people. They've been able to brave the COVID-19 storm, the economic headwinds of that, and things are going well in Venezuela. You also had, I said earlier, Bolivia, Colombia with Gustavo Petro. I mean, these aren't all the same trend because, for example, Mr. Boric in Chile, he's got some problematic tendency. Gustavo Petro also is, more of a social democrat. Alberto Fernandez in Argentina, the same way. There's obviously different political tendencies. They're not all one tendency. They're not all of the same kind of left. But one thing that does unite all of them is a genuine interest in uniting Latin America to achieve true independence, economic independence. And that is what unites them. And also, right, to build a stronger, more independent foreign policy also unites all of them. So it may be varying degrees, but in the end, in the final analysis, that's really where things are going, right? And of course, you have Cuba as well. We have just example after example of South America, Latin America moving to the left. You have socialism once again as part of the general conversation in this region. And of course, Latin America is a huge component of this multipolar world. And we're going to get to all of that. But I wanted to just say that, I mean, this is big in the sense that now, not only is a massive country like Brazil with so many natural resources, so much development happens there. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest economy in the region. There's so much potential for Brazil to play such a positive role. And with someone like Lula at the helm, at least that's not just a possibility, but at least in what capacity is possible, that will be the case. Unlike Bolsonaro, who was all about accelerating the worst excesses of imperialism and capitalism, of allowing Brazil to once again essentially be a neo-colony under the guise of some kind of nationalism, right? Some kind of far-right nationalism. That was Bolsonaro in a nutshell. So I wanted to talk about Bolsonaro. I mean, Bolsonaro. No, I wanted to talk about Lula, the significance of his career thus far. Like, what has he done? Why is it significant that he is back now at the helm? Because I think that this is important for people to recognize that it's not just that Lula is for the poor now, right? He is championing a more socially just, kind of economic program right now. Lula da Silva has a long history. He has been the head of state in Brazil before. So we should go over some of these milestones that Telesur was good enough to provide a very concise summary of what did Brazil achieve under his leadership thus far. What has it achieved thus far? So during his 2 terms, because he served 2 terms from 2003 to 2011, Brazil achieved a lot. Brazil, during this period, it was a historic period for Brazil. And, this was written just before the election, and it says they will, people will vote. But let's just go to between 2003 and 2011. Lula governed Brazil, and he implemented a heterodox economic policy that promoted growth without neglecting the well-being of the people. Currently, he once again embodies the possibility of building a society that's more equitable and just. After spending 580 days in jail as a result of political persecution, the former union leader accepted his candidacy and began campaigning with the Let's Go Together for Brazil movement. Here are some of the milestones of his career as a social justice fighter, as someone who struggles for social justice. So Lula da Silva is the 7th son of a family of farmers. He was born in 1945, October 27th, so his birthday was just 3 days ago, in Caetés, a town in the state of Pernambuco, where he spent the first years of his life. Later, his family moved to Sao Paulo, where he began working as a street vendor at the age of 8 and as a metal worker at the age of 14. During the 1960s military dictatorship, Lula joined the union struggle and began to stand out for his firm position denouncing the repression of the Brazilian people. Later, he founded PT, which is the Workers' Party. This emerged with unprecedented success and brought together dozens of Brazil's left-wing organizations in the 1980s. Once Brazil abandoned the dictatorship, Lula was elected lawmaker and ran as the first trade unionist candidate in the 1989 presidential elections. He also tried to reach the presidency in 1994 and 1998. He didn't succeed. But during these years, the Workers' Party managed to consolidate itself as the largest and strongest organization in opposition to the traditional elites or the oligarchy. In 2022, Lula is elected president and set a historic record, over 42 million votes in favor of a leftist political option in a country dominated by right-wing politicians. I think they meant in 2003, but nonetheless. All right, let's keep it moving. So, or is it 2002? I forget what the exact date was, but I think that was a typo in the article. So, the promotion of economic growth with social inclusion happened during his administrations, where he managed to get over 50 million Brazilians out of poverty through the application of a social protection system that included, quote unquote, Bolsa Familia, a money transfer program that became worldwide famous for its success. Between 2003 and 2011, macroeconomic stability and the control of inflation made it possible to expand the middle class by 51% and increase the minimum wage by 54%. This happened amid a process of increased public and private investment. Thanks to the confidence generated in the future, Brazil's gross domestic product increased at an average annual rate of 4%, allowing Lula to pay the debt with multilateral institutions like the IMF. Food insecurity, so this was a big criticism of Lula, actually, during his presidency, that he played ball with the IMF, which, say what you will of it, many countries have to play ball with the IMF because of the way the global financial system works. To wage war on the IMF is a very difficult thing to do in isolation, and most countries in South America don't wage war against the IMF. Now, Cuba in the 1980s, I don't know if you remember, Cuba was talking a lot about the debt issue and was, pursuing and has pursued overall, right, one of the, I guess, anomalous, you could call it, but I think it's just one of the more fierce programs of socialist economic development. However, I always thought it was unfair given that Lula never sacrificed the well-being of the poor for the diktats of the IMF, right? It was always an attempt to move forward under the conditions that were before the PT. And that means that there are going to be contradictions. But nonetheless, here it says food security and child malnutrition were considerably reduced through the Zero Hunger Program, whose coverage reached 93% of children and 82% of adults. Lula also promoted the My House, My Life program, which provided housing that directly benefited over 6 million Brazilians through the delivery of more than 1 million dwellings. These social policy achievements were accomplished by the creation of 14 public universities and increases in the education budget, two public policy actions that were conceived as mechanisms for justice and social inclusion. So there you go. I mean, people's lives improved during this period, right? You had more housing for people, you had more education, you had the universalization of education, you had more housing, and you also had the Bolsa Familia program, which was all about increasing people's incomes and allowing poor people to have a basic bare minimum sustenance, so they could, right, pursue jobs, so they could live better, so they could have transportation, that have funds to transport, to be able to do the things you need to live a life that allows you to meet the needs of yourself and your family. And so that is what is set to be again pursued under what has been now new conditions for Brazil. There has been many years under Bolsonaro, but also just under this kind of judicial coup regime, because Bolsonaro came to power out of that. Lula wasn't allowed to run, right? He was in prison. Bolsonaro won, but before that, you had the debacle of uh, 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 um, of Dilma Rousseff, right? The coup against her. So this is a big deal because now you have the Workers' Party back in political power, and now there is a mandate, but there's going to be contradictions because I know that things were close in the gubernatorial races. I know that, Brazil's political system is not united behind uh, Lula necessarily. So there's going to be a struggle, and we're going to see how that translates into policy. But nonetheless, uh, the direction of Brazil is going to improve here, and that I believe is super important and very, very, very key. And I think that we need to understand this as part of this. What I think is not a backlash, but a kind of renewal of the left. Because in Latin America, this kind of movement for integration, this Bolivarian kind of movement, this kind of 21st century socialism, it's been called. It's really a movement for self-determination. It's not without its contradictions, of course, because you had, right, like in Ecuador, for example, Mr. Lenin Moreno betraying the people, and then now they're ruled. I forget his name now, but that's by some banker, right? Because of that betrayal, and because of what that did to the legitimacy of the Correistas, those who followed the path of Rafael Correa and the Citizens' Revolution, right? Lots of contradictions in every country, but this trend toward integration is going to continue, and socialism is not just on the table, but it's a struggle that's happening right now in this region, right? It's not the only place where it's happening, and in arguably other places it's a little more advanced, but not many, right? Latin America really is the epicenter of the socialist left right now in many cases and in many respects. So now I wanted to talk to you about um, the global significance of this outside of even just the integration of Latin America. Because, Mercosur and ALBA and all these institutions are going to be strengthened with the victory of Lula da Silva. So all of these integration projects to bring together, pool together the resources of the region for more independence, economic development in that way, regionally, that's going to improve, of course. There's no doubt about that at all. But the um the significance of this extends far beyond that. We're talking about another victory for the ongoing process of a multipolar world. And one of the things that people might not know, and this was so funny, this was so hilarious, because I was looking at social media and there were people in the, I don't know, I guess you could say the MAGA communist trend, but there was also others who were saying that Lula was somehow uh, not going to, he was going to work with the West, and he was going to sell out to the West and not work with Russia and China. And this is against all facts, right? There's no factual basis to this. And I'm going to show you two reasons for this. One, we have to just look at how Lula da Silva was not just a champion of BRICS. So the financial institution, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, this alliance, Brazil under Lula was a huge champion of this, right? Arguably, it wouldn't have happened in the way that it did without Lula's leadership. So that cannot be understated. But you have the Workers' Party already, and I'm going to show you there was an interview done here by something called United World. Lula will revive BRICS, and this is from Daniela Matos, who is a member of the National Commission of the Workers' Party in Brazil. So this is written by Eunice Soner, and they say that this is just after the first round. So they spoke with representatives of the Workers' Party about Lula's expected foreign policy, and they talked to Daniela Matos, who I said again was they say a substitute member of the National Commission of the Workers' Party, and the party's envoy to Mexico, Alfonso Magalhães. And this is what Daniela Matos had to say. So, or this is what they both had to say about BRICS. Okay, what does this practically mean? If Lula wins, what does it mean for Latin American integration? And Daniela Matos says, it means that the reactivation of regional integration mechanisms like Parlasur or UNASUR. The recent electoral victory of Gustavo Petro in Colombia also offers great chances for cooperation, but Lula's election also means we will return to an active policy towards Africa, pursuing investments in that brotherly continent as we did before in strengthening economic relations. It says country here, but that might be translation. Magalhães says, BRICS and Mercosur will surely be reactivated. Same will happen with UNASUR and CELAC organizations. All these institutions have been greatly ignored by the Bolsonaro government. So, does Lula consider himself a leader of the whole Latin American continent? Does he have the perspective to represent the continent on a global scale? Matos says yes. He actually was a leader for the continent in his previous terms. He has that desire today as well. For instance, Bolsonaro has completely left aside the BRICS alliance, while Lula is going to reactivate solidarity and cooperation with the BRICS countries, and especially with African countries. So, I mean, that's going to be his foreign policy. That's the Workers' Party saying it outright. And now, I don't want to read, because the position of the Workers' Party is very good on the Ukraine situation. Lula and the Workers' Party, they condemn NATO. They believe NATO is the root cause of this war, and that this is a war between of NATO against Russia. So I don't want to read that, because I want to bring up something else, something very interesting. So I don't know if you all know that not only has Lula championed BRICS, right, which is an independent financial institution meant to not only gain independence from the dollar, but to build up economic development in such a way that it's independent of the US and European imperial hegemony altogether. That's the reason why BRICS came together. It wasn't just, oh, are we going to start to think about de-dollarization? It was an overall vision of how to work together better as developing emerging economies that have very close interests, in the sense that all of them have some kind of beef with the way that this Western financial and economic system has been laid out before them. It doesn't mean that, for example, South Africa and India aren't tied to these that world system. China, all of these countries are, but it means that all of them have a reason to want some kind of independence and want more of it, and that's why they came together. So not many of you know probably that Lula not only championed BRICS, he's also championing Argentina's membership into BRICS, which is in the works. They're the preliminary works, application process, all of that. So that's a huge deal. But there's also something else he suggested, which I found to be incredibly I mean, it's an incredible act of anti-imperialist resistance, which was advocating for this. This was back in August. Lula wants BRICS to broker a ceasefire in Ukraine. So this is a huge deal, first of all, to even just utter this, given that the NATO doesn't want a ceasefire, the US doesn't want a ceasefire, and they don't want any negotiations. They're helping Ukraine commit terror attacks all the time. I mean, look at what just happened in Sevastopol, right? This is of no interest. But Lula says it shouldn't even be brokered by the West at all. It should be BRICS doing it. So here's what Lula had to say back in August. He said that he met with Russia's ambassador to Brazil, Alexei Lebetsky, and suggested the BRICS group, the two countries share with India, China, and South Africa, broker a ceasefire in Ukraine. Lula insisted on the role of BRICS in the search for a solution to the war in Ukraine and has already met with foreign diplomats at the home of his lawyer, Cristiano Zanin, in Sao Paulo, according to Follow de Sao Paulo. In late July, Lula spoke with ambassadors from Russia, India, and South Africa about Eastern Europe. He intended to meet all BRICS delegates, but China's mission in Brazil is without an ambassador. Ambassadors Sharish Reddy, so that's because of Bolsonaro, okay? Very anti-China, very anti-China. Politically, economically, Brazil has to trade with China. But, Bolsonaro played up the anti-communist rhetoric and expressed it similarly to Trump politically. Lula also discussed the issue with ambassadors from Germany, France, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Poland. The former head of state is conveying to key players in the international arena some of the guidelines of a possible new government. Lula insisted that incumbent President Jair Bolsonaro had isolated Brazil from the world, particularly after meeting in Moscow with Russian leader Vladimir Putin in February, a week before the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine. In the meeting with BRICS countries, he asked Lebetsky about the reasons for the war from Russia's point of view, in which countries could influence the negotiation of a possible ceasefire. He questioned why BRICS was not engaged in trying to mitigate the effects of the war, since Russia is part of the bloc. Lula is committed to showing himself as a leader who seeks to work for peace, according to Folha. He also discussed the European Union's trade agreement with Mercosur and Brazil's accession to process the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. So, I mean, look, if we're for peace, right, if we want a negotiated settlement, because that's really the only way any kind of beginning rudiments of peace is going to happen in this situation. Not that I'm very optimistic about that at all at this moment, but I think the point is that Lula da Silva is saying that BRICS should broker this. And what's so interesting, I think, about BRICS is that this is talked about casually, right? Because all these countries, regardless of how subservient they need to be, right? For example, South Africa is very much integrated in the Western economic model. There's a lot, of course, inequality that's happened there because of it. But no matter how much that is true, it also stands to be true as well that these countries need to be, like India, for example, they need to be more independent from this Western catastrophic economic system that's, of course, crashing and burning right now. So it's almost kind of casual how this is being talked about. And Lula in August was coming right out and saying BRICS should be the leaders in this. The BRICS countries should come together as leaders and negotiate around how to bring peace, because there needs to be more economic stability, and that's what BRICS is all about. So that's a really, I mean, that is really an act of resistance. That would be a huge act of resistance that would infuriate the Western powers, the NATO, the United States. They wouldn't accept such a development. They wouldn't. If China, Russia, South Africa, India, and Brazil, let's say in January, were to come together and say, we're going to work out how to speak with Ukraine around how to negotiate this settlement. What do you think NATO would do? Immediately, there would be calls of interference. There would be so much cacophony about how much of a problem this is, and I'm sure these countries would be punished in some way. So that is how uh, uh, I think significant calling for this would be, and I hope, I truly hope. I mean, this is something we should actually take up ourselves if we are truly against war, if we're truly anti-imperialist, if we're truly for more sovereignty around the world, more breathing room, more self-determination for nations under the gun of U.S. imperialism, then we should be taking up that call as well for BRICS to be at the forefront, to take that leap and step. Whether BRICS is ready, whether it has the capacity to do that under the given political situation, that's more complicated. But just even floating the idea and pushing for the idea, which Lula did, which is, again, I think shows how wrong-headed people are in dismissing this as some kind of insignificant election, as some kind of, uh, even a loss for the left, I think is ridiculous. And so, I wanted to show you all that because it definitely, I think, brings a signal of positivity that things are going in the right direction when you have someone like Lula being elected and now, right, governing in a manner that is more aligned with this multipolar world, which humanity really needs to succeed. Humanity really needs to continue. Um, that is really, I think, of course, for Brazil and for working people in Brazil, for poor people, this is extremely significant. There's no hierarchy in terms of what is more important versus the other thing, right? But for me, in terms of the global picture, this is really at the top, right? Get more leaders who are willing to move in this direction. And Lula is one of them, to move in the multipolar direction. He's one of them. So, salute to the Workers' Party, to all those in Brazil who, were struggling for this, were fighting for this, and this is great news. And so I wanted to cover this, before I moved on to talking about some other things. So let me just take a swig of water. All right, stick around. Have you liked the video yet? Have you liked it? I just had Chinese food, so I'm so much salt, it's like definitely got me really thirsty. Have you liked the video yet, everyone? Like this video. Hit that subscribe button if you have not subscribed to this channel yet. And once again, I am, I think it's now closer to $40 per month on Patreon for my goal. That's my sustainability goal. It really is kind of like my end. Of course, Patreon is funny in that people, come on and off because of economic struggles. So if you could help me there, that's a great place. That's the place to support me. And also, you can become a member of this channel. It's another way you can support me. Substack and all of that is also in the links in the description as well. There's other ways to support if you choose. So go there. Be sure to support, right? If you can't do any of that, liking this video, boosting it. Let's see what that ratio is actually. Oh, it's good. All right. So we're about a little under, a little about 10 under. So, if 10 folks are there, haven't liked it yet, like the video. Liking, subscribing, of course, is the way to help this channel grow. So, um, where do we even begin? Because there's a lot going on in the world, all right? And I've been kind of struck with the level of escalations happening. By the way, for those, I'll probably be on for another half hour to an hour. I am also going to open this up to an Ask Me Anything for super chats. All right. I don't think anyone has submitted a super chat just yet, but if you have questions, I will answer them through the super chat function. The chat's going a little fast for anything else. So for super chat functions, I will answer questions. Depending on how many there are, I'll pivot from this next story. So, all right, folks, let's move on now. Let's talk about how NATO is one linking China to its support for Ukraine, and how NATO, and this is what I wanted to talk about in addition, right? Because you have now in Brazil, the Workers' Party is back, and the Workers' Party understands the situation much better than Bolsonaro, who did absolutely nothing to challenge this, to play a positive role in brokering peace and being part of the multipolar world. So now you have someone like Lula da Silva, who is very vocal about NATO's role in provoking this war. So NATO has not stopped. You all know this. NATO continues to promise more weapons to Ukraine, even though it barely has any more. But we know that NATO has been involved in the sabotage of Nord Stream. We know that NATO is involved in all of the ills that are afflicting humanity, this economic crisis, all of it because of how NATO, the United States, we should just say, but the NATO alliance that it rules over and wields to escalate things. We know that it's only gotten worse and worse and worse in terms of NATO's escalations. Now we have a lot of talk about nuclear sharing. Poland is in discussions and is going to host NATO's nuclear weapons. You know that NATO has Article 5 of its constitution, which says if there's an attack on any NATO member state, then that triggers Article 5 of the Constitution, which says that all other states must come to the aid of that attacked, quote unquote, country. So this is a big issue for Russia when it comes to Ukraine, because where is Ukraine? Oh, it's right along Russia's border. Right along Russia's border. So this military encirclement, right? This a massive increase of NATO countries since 1991, when there was a supposed right before the fall, right during the Gorbachev period, there was an agreement that NATO would not expand. Well, I believe 12 countries have been added since then, and that number has only grown recently with the addition of Sweden and Finland. Both countries right on Russia's doorstep. Finland, really, I mean, when you look at where Finland is on a map, Finland is essentially bordering Russia. So all of this has happened to escalate matters even worse. That's why there's nuclear conflict always on the political agenda in terms of the conversation. Biden and company and the ruling establishment in the West are trying to say Russia wants nuclear war, yet everything NATO is doing is leading there. Now, NATO is stepping it up even more. Not just is NATO talking to Poland about nuclear sharing, but now it's talking to Finland, because Finland is a new member, right? Finland is now an official member, and it has the NATO applicant outlines its stance on hosting nuclear weapons. So she's the Finnish PM, Sanna Marin, right? The so-called social democrat, right? Finland is always talked about as like one of these countries, right? The so-called socialist bloc countries in social democratic countries in this region that, you know, they're models because they have universal health care. Well, they're also models for endless war and aggression. So, NATO applicants outline stance on hosting nuclear weapons. The Finnish PM, Sanna Marin, won't rule out the US led bloc deploying weapons of mass destruction in the Nordic country. Sanna Marin has warned that NATO could establish permanent bases or deploy nuclear weapons in Finland once the country joins the bloc. So I guess it's still in the application process. It wasn't fast tracked as we imagined because there was such a backlash to it, but Finland is going to become a NATO state unless something completely changes, right? Finland will become a NATO state. Although she's added that the scenario is unlikely, I've considered it very important we don't set these kind of preconditions or limit our own room for maneuvering when it comes to permanent bases or nuclear weapons. She qualified her statement by adding that such a development was not necessarily in the cards. Earlier this week, Helsinki-based newspaper Iltalehti claimed that the bill on Finland's NATO membership does not contain any opt-outs in relation to nuclear weapons. The government is set to present the legislation to Parliament for consideration. The paper, citing anonymous defense sources, wrote that in July, Finnish Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto and Defense Minister Ati Kaikkonen promised the military alliance's officials that Helsinki would not impose any restrictions or national reservations if its candidacy were approved. This means that NATO's nuclear weapons could transit through or be deployed on Finnish soil, much like its permanent military bases. When asked about the prospect of Finland actually joining NATO anytime soon, Marin expressed hope that Hungary and Turkey would swiftly give the green light to its accession bid to NATO, which the Nordic country, along with Sweden, officially logged on May 18th. The consent of all 30 member states is needed for the two countries to be accepted into the military alliance. Helsinki and Stockholm, which had maintained neutrality for decades, cited Russia's military offensive against Ukraine as the reason for their landmark decision. And commenting on Finland and Sweden's potential accession, Russia spokesperson Dmitry Peskov warned in June that the move would further escalate tensions between Moscow and the West because they have a 1,340-kilometer border. So I forgot about that. Turkey was the one to block it. I completely forgot. Things move so fast. Turkey was the one to block this, and Hungary as well. So there is still kind of an obstacle. But of course, you know that the NATO alliance is trying to squeeze those countries to agree because this is something that the United States wants to happen very badly. Because the United States is flirting with war with Russia. That's what it's doing. And it's flirting in a way where it wants to pursue. I mean, for lack of a better term, it wants to pillage Russia. It wants to treat Russia like the United States treats the rest of the world, much of the rest of the world, which is like a vassal state. It wants to turn it into one, wants to break it up. And so it sees NATO expansion as the biggest component of this. This is why the United States is fighting to the last Ukrainian, is pushing this war to the last Ukrainian. It doesn't care about Ukraine. It cares about moves like this, which Ukraine has opened up, right, as a pawn. It's a pawn. And look at all these moves that have opened up for the United States, not least the destruction, the outright just evisceration of Europe's economy, which is ongoing and it's only going to get worse. So Finland is already talking about, this is so interesting, already talking about hosting nuclear weapons. So these Nordic countries, these models, they're so amazing for socialism. No, they're not worker states. They're not socialist states. They're not sovereign states. They are following the diktats. If it wasn't for Turkey and Hungary, these countries are no peaceniks. I mean, these aren't political allies. Turkey is trying to play all sides all the time because Turkey's trying to figure out itself. But Turkey has played a key role in Syria and that war. Turkey is not, right. It's not like Turkey is some kind of objective peace broker here. No, Turkey is just doing what it believes is best for itself at this moment, which is not poke the Russian bear. And so it's playing a positive role here, but at the same time, Finland is the story here. Finland is the one. This Nordic country that all the social democrats or socialist light or socialist-ish um, Western leftists love to gush over. They're literally talking about nuclear weapons, bringing nuclear weapons to their country. No restrictions, right? No reservations, no policy. Once they're into NATO, they're going. Finland is going to host these weapons, and Finland is on Russia's border. What makes that any different or any worse than what's going on in Ukraine? With Ukraine, you have an outright war, a siege to bring Ukraine into the fold because of how controversial it is. Finland just bowed down. Finland's not even a coup regime. It's just bowing down to the United States in this way. And so this is just incredibly important. It's a learning opportunity. It's a teaching moment, right? This conflict in Ukraine is just full of teaching moments. And if one of those moments is that we learn that Nordic so-called socialist or social democratic countries are really just imperialist countries, if that's one of the lessons, and so be it. And that's one of the silver linings of all of this, is that we get more opportunities to talk about that, because that's the reality. That's the only way we're going to see through it. And that's the only way we're going to move people to support a multipolar world, one led by Russia, China, and other global South countries, rather than these imperialist, unhinged uh, countries that are just catastrophically and callously and with just such utter hubris, bringing the world to the brink of nuclear war. That's what's happening, and that's what Finland is spearheading. I've heard Sanna Marin. I've heard her talk. She's a war hawk. She's talking about Russia like anyone else would. How is that different, right? And what does that mean for Finland? Finland maybe has more kind of domestic stability, but best believe the whole entire European continent is going to be affected by this economic crisis. And that means more austerity for these Nordic countries too, which they're no stranger to that, because it happens there too. It's even reported in mainstream media of how these countries, right? I believe New Zealand was covered once as how they treat indigenous people there and how they subject them to austerity, right? So you have these models that are often talked about in this pure kind of lily white sense, when in fact they have numerous contradictions, all of which point to their subservience to imperialism. And so that's not going to end well for anybody. But Sanna Marin and these opportunists are bowing down to the United States because that's who they call master. And that's who they believe is their rightful leader, which means they just co-sign everything that the United States does. And so that's the pathway this crisis is on. There's no independence here. You have countries like France and even Germany at times saying, we can't go on like this. When are they going to do something about it? It might be too late by the time it happens. They might be too late. So I'll cover this one last story, and then if there's any super chats, I will address them. So NATO not only is, of course, seeking to just place its nuclear weapons, right, in anywhere it deems it wants to, right? It wants them in Poland, it wants them in Finland. But NATO is also targeting China. So you might have remembered during the NATO summit back earlier this year, I believe that was was that May? Back in that period, um, the NATO strategic document, right? Their new strategy labeled China malicious and said that China is huge in terms of being a threat to NATO's continued security, right? Well, NATO has once again, right? Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of this imperialist mad dog literally defecating all over the planet. Jens Stoltenberg, the top defecator, he says that China is linked to NATO's support for Ukraine. So you probably remember this early on, late February, when this began, the conflict. March, April, May. After May, I think it kind of cooled down into the summer. On and on and on, the Western corporate media would say, why isn't China pulling Russia aside, pulling its like why isn't it pulling its friend aside and saying, hey, stop this? Why isn't it playing a positive role? Meanwhile, you have NATO just pumping tens of billions into Ukraine, arming these the Azov battalion, neo NAZIs, right? As they're slaughtering people in Mariupol and Bucha. Like you have NATO arming these forces. And they're talking about China. Why aren't you doing something about this? That always struck me as just such a sign of US imperialism's hypocrisy, but also its desperate infantilism. Like it is an infantile system. It is one that is completely without solutions. And so it always has to either project or try to bring into the fold some kind of big lie to cover up what the reality of the situation is. And here they go again, right? So a victory for Moscow would be a catastrophe for Kiev and bad for the West, Stoltenberg warns. The U.S. should continue supporting Ukraine because a Russian victory in the conflict would empower China, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has claimed. A victorious Russia would, quote, be bad for all of us in Europe and North America and the whole of NATO because that will send a message to authoritarian leaders, not only Putin, but also China, that by use of brutal military force, they can achieve their goals, end quote. That's what Stoltenberg said in an interview with Politico, extracts of which were published Friday. So that was Friday of the of this week. So just a couple days ago. So it's important to stand together and address the consequences of the rise of China, and that we agree on, and that's exactly what we are doing, said Stoltenberg, referring to Beijing being designated as a challenge to the bloc this summer. So as I said, that's what they did. So it comes in the wake of the midterm elections in the U.S. on November 8th, in which Republicans are expected to make significant gains and reclaim control of at least one chamber of Congress. While the Democrats have been united in their backing of Ukraine, many Republicans, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, have recently indicated that the flow of aid to Kiev might subside significantly or even come to a complete halt after the vote. However, the NATO chief said he was confident that quote, also after the midterms, there'll be a clear majority in Congress, in the House, and in the Senate for continued significant support to Ukraine, end quote. He ain't lying there. Washington's assistance to Kiev must be maintained, partly because if President Vladimir Putin wins in Ukraine, that will be a catastrophe for the Ukrainians. According to Stoltenberg, the continued military presence of the U.S. and Canada in Europe was overall essential to the strength and credibility of the transatlantic bond, end quote. I mean, it sounds fascistic. The transatlantic bond. The U.S. has been Ukraine's strongest backer in its conflict with Russia since late February, providing Kiev with weapons, funds, and intelligence. They've already supplied Washington alone, has supplied Ukraine with $17 billion in military aid to Zelensky's government, far more than European countries have committed collectively. The deliveries of American arms have launched sophisticated hardware such as HIMARS, multiple rocket launchers, M77, 777 howitzers, and combat drones, all of which are running out, though. That's what this article isn't saying, but they're running out. So, of course, Russia has been criticizing Western aid to Ukraine, saying it only prolongs the fighting and increases the risk of direct confrontation between Russia and the United States or Russia and NATO. So, Stoltenberg they're just saying the quiet part out loud now. And this is something that they've been talking about for a long time. How long has these group of white supremacists, and I see one of the moderators big deal saying, yeah, I mean, transatlantic bond, talk about racism, talk about white supremacy. I mean, that's a clear expression, right? I mean, give me a break. What kind of bond are we talking about here? Are you talking? It's not a regional bond. It's literally a political bond of countries that identify as white European, Anglo-American. Even Putin is saying this. Putin is saying these are Anglo-Saxon countries trying to pillage the world and keep it under the model that's centuries old now of colonial dominion. This is not a secret. So there's been this conversation that's been so utterly toxic amongst the Western political, military, and media establishment, and that is that if Russia is doing this, then China is going to do it to Taiwan. This brings the goalpost so far away from the truth of Western provocations, NATO provocations leading to this war, that it leads us into territory of China is going to invade its own sovereign territory, Taiwan, because it feels emboldened, because it feels threatened by actual democracy, right? Which means separatism, which means embrace this U.S. militarization campaign that the U.S. is doing in Taiwan. But somehow it's the same thing. China is now going to invade because Russia's invading. It's this very jingoistic mindset of these countries are all just authoritarian. They're unhinged. They have no reason for doing this. Dominance for dominance sake. The white man's burden needs to come and smash them with their democracy and with their freedom. That's the narrative here. And that's been the narrative since the very beginning, because since the very beginning, the real goal here with Ukraine is a flashpoint, not just for NATO expansion, not just for possibly an outright confrontation with Russia, but also a real flashpoint for testing out what it would mean to locate the point, a strategic point for a two-front war with Russia and China. What do I mean by that? Well, Ukraine is that flashpoint for Russia. Taiwan is that flashpoint for China. That's where they're constantly compared. It's because Taiwan is where the United States sees an opening, given its longtime support and now its escalating support for separatism, independence, and all of the militarization and political interference that comes with that, sees Taiwan as that strategic location to test out those waters. So what this means is that when you hear Jens Stoltenberg talk like this, he's doing it not because he is talking about some real legitimate quote unquote threat. What he's talking about is that NATO is committed to supporting this overall US led policy of provoking China in the same way it's doing to Russia right now. That these are interrelated phenomena that point in the same direction. A new Cold War, that there are some forces within the political establishment in the US led West that wants to see this become an all out war. I'm not saying it's everybody, right? Not to give the political establishment, not to give the ruling class any credit here. I said it with Brian Berletic yesterday. I said, well, if you go nuclear with Russia and China, your system is gone, right? Because you're gone. The humanity is gone. So there are forces, of course, that even if they're not loud, even if they're not, you have the Biden administration pressured into phone calls with Putin, right? You have that, or with the Russian government. You have the same with China. You still have channels, even though they've closed massively since Pelosi's visit. You've had many channels closed. You still have channels open. But there are those who want this. And Stoltenberg obviously represents the talking head of those who are wanting to test this out. Because anyone you hear talking about, well, we've got to stop Russia because we got to stop China, they're in that camp. They're in that camp. Just put them in that camp. They're part of that military industrial complex. They're part of that quote unquote deep state, that militarist establishment that are saying this is the future. This is the future of conflict. This is the future of where things are headed. This is the existential threat that Russia and China pose to US hegemony and this is where it's going to lead. So that's what you should mark down when you hear this. You should mark it down. And I wanted to show you that story because it really does tell you where NATO is heading. It tells you what NATO is thinking. It's thinking just like it's the US's poodle, right? It's its big attack dog. It's like an unneutered attack dog. I guess this is a bad joke, but the NATO countries are the parts that are not neutered, so to speak, right? And so those are the parts that are being foisted upon the world. That's what's happening. That's what NATO is doing. That's how NATO acts, and it's headed toward a two-front war with Russia and China. And so every time you hear this, China, Russia, China, Ukraine, Taiwan, it's because those forces, that's what they want. They want war with them, which means we should want the opposite of that. We should want the opposite of that. So I think I will end the content part of this. All right. And answer some questions if you have any. I don't see any super chats today, I don't think, unless I missed them. I don't think so. So some announcements before I get to the chat. I didn't say hi to anyone in the chat in the beginning. I can look it over. It's pretty quick, pretty fast today. Thanks to everyone for coming. A few announcements. So I will probably go live again the evening of Wednesday night, November 2nd. But after that, I will not be back until probably the week of the 20th, maybe the week of the 14th if something opens up. I know my wife has a friend visiting the latter half of that week, and I'll probably have to do dog duty while they're doing that, while they're like doing their thing. So perhaps I'll be back on that week, but more likely the week of the 20th of November, that Thanksgiving week. Hell, I may actually do a Thanksgiving stream because I'll be celebrating. I don't celebrate Thanksgiving, but I'll be gathering with people probably on a different day. So, if you want me to rail against colonialism and imperialism on a day, you can catch me. But I'm going to be going on an extended vacation. Clips are I'm preparing them for I'm preparing clips for that entire period that I'm gone. So the channel will be active. I just won't be going live, which I'm very sad about. I love going live with all of you all. And this channel has been experiencing some pretty good growth, significant growth. And so I've really appreciated all of you who have come here. Of course, before I get to other announcements, support this channel. I see new subscribers on Patreon. Actually, you're probably watching. Thank you so much to Eric and to Daniel for those new subscriptions. That's the best way to support my work. With their subscriptions, actually, they bring me probably closer to $35 per month left for my sustainability goal. And you can also become a member of this channel, which if you do during the stream, you will pop up and I will acknowledge you. Other than that, though, there's many other ways to support in the chat. But other announcements include, I'm hoping to get a whole host of guests on here later November, the month of December. Hopefully, we can get that going. But the big one is the vacation. And then, of course, the stream that will probably be coming up Wednesday evening, I hope to do as kind of like a last one. Maybe I'll make that an AMA for Patreon subscribers and members of this channel. And, super chats, and you can support me that way before I leave. I may do that, or, things may come up. Hell, I may even have it depends on what happens, but expect me then. Of course, you can support me. You can find me so many places. one of the ways you can also support me is tipping on Rockfin. I'm on Rockfin at the Left Lens. I'm streaming there right now. So, rockfin.com/the left lens. You can find me. You can leave a tip. That's another way you can support this work. But other than that, though, no other announcements. Those were the big ones. Let me go through. Okay, so we have Big Teal. I'm gonna just put those on the screen for you all. So you see, check out my link tree. You get the socials, all of that. Another announcements, because it's in my link tree, but I've canceled my call-in show. So my contract ended with them. I was getting paid you know, it was an amount. It wasn't. I won't make comments on how good or bad it was. But that contract ended, and I just don't have the time to keep up with something. They've encouraged me to continue on call-in. I really do appreciate the direct contact with my followers, but um but I can't keep that up. Callin's a great app. I think it was a great idea, but it's hard to keep up a weekly podcast. In general, I was having trouble with it already, but so I officially canceled that because that contract ended. So, there you can support me on Rockfin, as I just put on the screen. Let's see. I don't see any super chats. I don't see any super chats for questions, which is no problem. You can send them now if you have any comments. Please do. That's another way to support. A lot of good conversation in the chat, though. Yeah, keep liking the vid. Let's see where we are with the like situation. Oh wow, look at that. We're way above. We're 600 likes now. 662. So thanks so much. Yeah, I have some ideas for writing as well. I haven't been able to write as much, more shorter pieces. I shared here my article on the CIA and the Global Times. I have an article idea of writing about China is making history. The U.S. is repeating it. That's something I was like, oh, that's a catchy title. So I might write something about that. I also want to get back into my ghost stories of capitalism. It's Halloween. I wish I had one right before Halloween. But I don't have one yet. But I do want to talk about how I came into this struggle against imperialism from the perspective of realizing racism was a problem in America, in the United States, through my lens, through seeing it, but also experiencing it. And what were those moments, and how I believe they pushed me to begin to study Marxism and anti-imperialism and socialism and anti-capitalism, and right, really to become an anti-establishment political analyst in independent media. I started as an activist. I started as an organizer. And so that's my beginnings. And so I hope to write an article about that eventually, probably this season. I'm guessing before the winter season comes, I'll have written that. But things have been so hot here. Like I have been here. I have been really busy, right? Get a lot of very interesting guests on this program. A lot of geopolitics, international politics, which has become kind of my wheelhouse at this point, just because to me, we can't fight all battles. And I know that there are great people doing other work. And here, right, I have a lot of China-centered analysis, but it's all within this broader scope of what's happening around the world, and centering U.S. imperialism as the problem, and centering the struggle for a multipolar world as the outgrowth of resistance. And so that's really where I come from now, more so. I'm not trying to exclude anything, which is why I do diversify the content on here as much as I can. But that's really my focus, and it's been a really busy time for all of that, especially since February. So I want to say hello to new member Janine Maland. Thanks so much for your membership. I saw that happen recently, so I really appreciate that. I want to give you a shout out because I give a shout out to all the YouTube members who are here, who are supporting this channel. Appreciate all of you. That's one way you can, right? Because I recently instituted that. It's not fancy. I don't have fancy emojis just yet. Maybe that will come at some point in the future, but not yet. So I got so I don't have any real big questions here. I don't see any super chats. You know, we had a good stream today. It's not the longest one that I wanted to just cover the election to get on here because I do plan probably on coming back Wednesday to cover some other things, right? Definitely want to cover China and Vietnam's relationship because the Communist Party leader, the president of Vietnam, he's going to be visiting China very soon in the next couple of days. That's very intentional. So I hope to cover that on Wednesday, as well as whatever else should come up too. So I want to save that. Someone asked me how I like the new digs. I think this is a supporter of mine. Where are you? I just saw it. I think you asked this. Was it you, Desert? This is funny. Selling merchandise like Danny Dhaiphong boxer shorts and left lens toothbrushes. I mean, it's just a lot to manage. I know someone who was trying to help me out on this channel was saying I should get with now my logo. You see it up at the top there, t-shirts and stuff like that. Oh God, it's a lot. It's a lot. So, you know, I still work part-time because as much as I would love to do this 40 plus hours a week, plus, I don't want to do it plus, but as much as I would do this full time, there are so many considerations. One of them is monetarily, but also, I still do part-time work just to stay in that arena as well. Like, I don't know, but there's a balancing act I'm doing, but I am on here more, as you can tell. But I hope, but the more support you can give through the means, the more I can consider later on, especially perhaps within the next year, right, doing this even more full time. More like I still am doing this full time because I did promise that, but I do actually have a job, says President Jesus. I do. Big Teal says no more calling, no more calling. For me, there's calling. No more calling for me. I love my podcast, Cold War and Brew. I thought it was clever. I was never able to work out getting guests on that though. It's just a lot of work, and it was just hard. Tip the man. So that means tip me on Rockfin. For those of you on Rockfin, you can tip me. Big Teal, one of the moderators here, says so. So you should listen to them. So I'll answer this question, even though it's not a super chat. I'm not going to discriminate. There's some funny questions. But I want to, where to go? Here we go. This is a good question. Pachika Roan. What is the truth that Chinese reunification is now a definitive part of the next 5-year plan after this last party Congress? So reunification is part of every plan. China has never not had that in its plan. So it's a part of every plan. But what's different? What's different now is that peaceful reunification is still 100% on the table, but China has, the CPC has amended it saying they're not against using force if that's what they're forced to do. Meaning and this has been clear since the beginning from China. They've said over and over and over again, we're not going to aggressively, militarily, right, absorb Taiwan and violate our own one country, two systems policy, which they have their own form of with Taiwan. We're not going to do that. We're not going to change the relationship in that way unless there's interference and there is a bold move to separate Taiwan from China. That's really what was reiterated. That's what the CPC Constitution now says in its own terms. I can't recite them in that exact manner as it is printed in its Constitution, but that is what the CPC is saying now. And it's because the political conditions have changed so much. Donald Trump, I mean, Obama did this a little bit, but it was really Donald Trump that was willing to go that extra step, and Biden has only further escalated. Unlike Obama, which I think Obama, even though he started to pivot to Asia and sent more weapons, it did start there, but never was Obama so bold. Never was he so bold to um, go so far politically through legislation as well as through feeding into this separatist element in Taiwan. Never did he go that far. But then Trump did, Taipei Act and so many other escalations. And now you have the Taiwan Policy Act, right, which is kind of like cementing Taiwan as this chip in a broader Asian NATO scheme. This is what Biden is doing. So Biden, as Margaret Kimberly said on this program, worse than Trump, worse than Obama on this question. And that's why the CPC has changed its policy, because you had the Pelosi visit, you've had Blackburn, you've had so many Ed Markey, these hacks in Congress visiting, violating the one China policy. And of course, the militarization is probably the most serious aspect of that. It's the most serious aspect of that. So uh, I wouldn't say that it's a definitive part now of the 5-year plan. I think it was always a definitive part, reunification, but Taiwan is now spoken about a bit differently in the sense that China is not ruling out the use of force, military force, if it feels like it's being threatened, if if it feels its sovereignty is being threatened. And that is 100% entirely reasonable given the way that the political situation has changed. And so that was one of the more interesting things about the CPC's 20th National Congress, is that it was so clear that China was that the CPC at the helm in China was not just reviewing achievements, not just conducting self-criticism, right? What wasn't achieved and what has to be achieved forward, but it was also reforming itself based on new political conditions. And that's what the CPC and the Chinese Revolution has done since the beginning. Continuously changing, right? Acknowledging errors and moving forward on the correct path, even if things aren't always done correctly. And that's one of the things that I think is so interesting, and it's not really talked about, is that China politics and policies change quite a bit, even if the Communist Party of China's leadership is not under question. What is constantly changing is the policies and the politics, right? The way that China speaks about its development, the way that the CPC speaks about the tasks ahead is constantly changing. And so goes the same for Taiwan. That's a great question. That's a great question. I think you sent me a super chat after that. I can't even see. Yes. Oh, where'd it go? Jeez. Jeez, guys. Jeez. Thank you so much, Danielle, for this super chat. And then Pachico, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, all right. It's getting late, guys. May head out in a few minutes. Yeah. Well, this was a good night. I was having a tough day, actually. I don't know what it's been. I feel like it's the same as going with all my therapy clients too. It's just like I don't know if it's the daytime changes. It's not really the cold because it's been so. I'm 8 minutes over. Says Baked. It's been up and down. The temperature out where I am. What type of candy do I eat? Well, I don't eat much candy anymore because I'm not so health conscious. I'm not I wish I were more. That's one of my goals is to be a little more health conscious. I don't like to go so overboard because I feel like there is like this self-care extremely dictatorial authoritarian capitalist mindset that gets you thinking that anything you do individually is just gonna make you live forever and the best. I do believe healthy eating means you will probably feel better. And I try my best. That's what I say. I try my best, doing my best. I hope you all are doing your best too. But what kind of candy do I eat? Uh I love chocolate. I don't eat much candy though. I am addicted to chocolate almonds. I gotta say. Might sound corny, but I'm addicted to those things. There are certain types, brands. I don't know what they are. I couldn't name them because I don't look at brands like that. But um, I'm addicted to those things, and I'll put those in breakfast food all the time. It's one of my habits, and that could be that's candy. I mean, honestly, the sugar content is the same as candy, even if it doesn't supposedly have the same whatever preservatives and chemicals and all that crap that's in candy. But we'll see tomorrow. I don't know if I'm gonna go trick or treating with my dog, but we have a costume for him. Maybe maybe I can share that. I can share a photo of my dog's costume. No, I didn't put it on Instagram. Ah, crap. Um, I didn't put any of him on Instagram. Oh, I need to do that. My dog. Maybe I should send. I sent it to my. I could email it to myself maybe and download it. I sent my friend the photo. Let me send this. Let me send. I want to show you all. Stay tuned. This is really important, guys. This is really important to end the night on a really nice note. Oh man, I hate Gmail on the phone. It's only saying I can get one photo at a time. That's bull. Um, let me see if I can do something actually. So stick around. This is really important for all of you who are later. If you're on the West Coast, you can wait. It's only what 7:41 out there. If you're out east, it's probably in the morning out there, right? So you're good. For you East Coasters, for you Eastern time folks, this is really worth staying up for. I swear to you. If you like dogs, that is. Let me show you because I don't get to show you because I can't really move my camera from here. So I don't show you all that often, my dog, and it would be really hard to get that, it's just a lot. So let me just email these to myself. Or are they just in my Gmail, in my drive? I don't know. This is, you know, Gmail is funky. That's all I gotta say. Google, ABC, that big corporation, they suck. Um, really inconvenient, like super inconvenient. Let me see. Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen. See if I download these photos. Oh gosh. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. Oh, come on. Gmail is just so annoying. All right. Download that one. Download that one. I'll just open them all up. Download that one. All right. This is worth it. I swear this is worth it. I swear. um. Oh, it looks like I'm gonna have to like share them one at a time. No. All right, this one is my favorite, so I definitely want to share this one. All right, so let me see if I can do this, guys. You're still there. Oh, look, I got another super chat too. Canadian anti-capitalist YouTuber with over 24,000 subs would like to invite you on my show. How can I contact you? Oh, all right. Yeah, we should do that. He'll probably have to come after my vacation if that's all right. Sorry. It's just I'm taking some, my wife's off a few days in the middle of the week. I will be streaming myself. Let me just send you my email. I'll just put it in the chat if that's all right with you. Brighton's thoughts. All right. So there's my email. Now you all have my email too. Don't spam me, okay? I don't think you will, but you can say hello. That's fine. This email doesn't get that. I use this more for like media business, and so it's not like my Gmail, which is out of control. You notice how they have storage limits on Gmail? So do you remember that? Did you see that now? Like storage limit, so you can buy more storage from Gmail as if that's something anybody wants. Give me a break. Who wants to buy storage for Gmail? Like no one's gonna do that. All right. Let's see. Here we go. Window. There we go. All right. Here comes the dog. Here comes the costume. You are getting it for the first time. All right. You're the first people to see this outside of close friends and family. Here we go. You ready for this? Drum roll, please. I'm not good at drum rolls. All right. There he is. There's Eugene. Ah, come on. All right. There he is. All right. I guess I have to keep it on the screen here. There's Eugene. He is Spock. He's Spock for Halloween. So there he is. He's a girl. Look at that. Look how cute. He is so displeased in this photo. All of the photos. He's very displeased. Let's see if other photos will come up if I do this. Did that happen? No. All right, so I have to, if I'm going to show any others, I have to take this photo down, which I'm going to do. And then I'm going to put up the others. All right, hold on one second. This is just annoying as hell. Here we go. Here he is. Here's another photo of him in the outfit. So it came with hair. So this thing came with like the Spock ears, which just look like pig ears. It was so cheap. It came with his ears look more like Spock ears than the pig ears that they gave him with fake hair. But the fake hair looked like a bad toupee in the pig ears, and it covered his ears, which no dog wants their ears covered. No dog wants their ears covered. That's a very uncomfortable. Like dogs aren't human beings. It was a cheap costume, it's fine. He barely fits into this one. It's really hard to fit this dog to fit Eugene. He's so hard to fit. So hard to fit. So there you go. There is my Halloween. We're gonna try to put that on him tomorrow afternoon and walk, we do a late afternoon walk, do his late afternoon walk. Somebody asked, does he show socialist tendencies? So it's funny. Don't cancel me for this, but we were calling him like kind of like a non-binary. We called him our non-binary baby when we first got him. He wasn't really a baby, but we were calling him that because he kind of acts like a baby. Um, because his behavior has so many like it's like passive sometimes, and now he's gaining some more dominance, and so he has these like traits in the way he interacts, and he like loves all dogs, like all dogs. So we were calling him that. Socialist tendencies. I mean, here's the thing: he's not a good player. Like he doesn't. I don't. I don't have all the. I don't have the time to train him to be like a he likes to play keep away, and that stuff is supposedly not good for dogs, like demeanor and like their yeah, it's not good for their training. Like you don't want to train a dog to be dominant because that can lead to aggression later on. So he's not the greatest player. Like he'll start to like eat the toys and stuff like that. So he's not like he's not like a communal player, but he loves daycare. He loves all dogs. He wants to be around dogs all the time. Um, so in that way, yeah, and he does have some herding in him. So he wants us all together all the time. He doesn't like when we're in separate rooms and stuff like that. So he does have some, I guess you could say, socialist tendencies. Um, somebody said he's hoarding. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That kind of behavior is not good. So we don't actually do the toy thing. He's not into it that much. He's kind of a nervous player. So it's like dog time at daycare is fine and walks are sufficient. And his energy's out. Somebody said dog daycare is great. Dog daycare is amazing. Big Teal said he might be like that because of prior experience. Yes, I rehomed him. He was over a year, and he I think he spent a lot of time in a yard in the suburbs. He had another dog who was a little older living with him, who I think gave him a lot of those tendencies. So luckily he's very, he's very quick to learn, and he doesn't like he's not fussy. It's not like he's like, give me playtime, give me playtime. He's good with walks, and he's good with daycare. Um Daycare just really helps me more than I think it helps him, but I think it helps him be with other dogs to get that out because out in the neighborhood, um I'm not trying to play with other dogs in the neighborhood. I got him on a leash. It's a lot, and there's dogs everywhere now. Everyone has dogs now, especially out in the city. So, um, so yeah, um, anyway, yeah, hoarding might mean he didn't get. Yeah, I mean he was in the shelter before he was in the suburban home. They treated him, I think, pretty good, but you know, I think the other dog was kind of alpha, kind of punked him a lot. When we visited, it was kind of a the way that other dog acted. I could see where he got some of these tendencies. Um, but he's doing really good. He's doing really good. I mean, he's settled in. Now working on separation because separation anxiety is like a thing for all dogs now. All dogs have separation anxiety because of COVID and life and how life changed under COVID, and so he has it. Um, but yeah, we got some tools. It's getting better, and you know, somebody asked what breed this dog is. I don't know. We're gonna do the tests because I think it's interesting. I think he's a mix of uh, a breed called the McNabb Collie because I did some of these just like researching. So he has kind of features of that dog, like the ears, and I think he has some pit bull in him. I would imagine he could have some terrier. I don't know. He's got a lot though. I think it's probably more than two. It's probably more than two. Um. Oh, somebody said their dog is separation dog. So I want to take out the garbage. Yeah, I mean, Eugene is kind of like that too. He won't cry, but he'll definitely be worked up. So like if I were to take out the garbage and leave for minutes at a time, depending on what's being done, like what I do now is I give him food. I try to give him a nice kind of meal that keeps him occupied for a while, gets him sniffing and stuff like that, and that kind of breaks the ice with leaving him a little bit, and then test out, see how long he can goes. That's kind of how I've been doing it. Luna, the member, says, "Cute fur baby." Thanks, Luna, for your membership. By the way, appreciate it. Somebody said those tests are expensive. They are, which is why we haven't done it yet. For the breeds. Yeah, no, I mean that's like something where not um not rushing to do. Maybe we will. So so somebody says news or dog photo break. News is over. I'm newsed out. I was just on live yesterday with Brian Berletic. That was a 2-hour conversation. This was an hour and a half now going on too. So no more news. But that is Eugene. He's right here sleeping like a baby. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. That's the stream today, guys. I'm sure somebody will comment being like, cut this out, cut this out. I don't know if I'm going to cut it out. Maybe I'll do timestamps for you all who are so keen on like not wanting to scroll. I get it. I get it when you don't know where to like don't know where content starts and stops. So I've been trying to do like I've been trying to do timestamps more often, even just a couple if it's just like interview starts here, because sometimes the music goes on a while. I get it. But the YouTube editing feature, I'm not gonna swear on my own program, but it sucks. They think it's so convenient, but nothing's ever loading. Like I have good internet. I'm sorry. That YouTube editing feature sucks. I haven't been able to use it for so long. Maybe I should contact YouTube, but I don't got time for all this. I got work to do. I don't got time messing with YouTube. I'm doing clips every day. Like I got other editing to do. And that's just basic editing. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I've been like, sometimes people say on comments, "Hey, why? Come on, it starts here." Blah blah blah. I'm like, yes, I know. I'm sorry. I can't. In terms of production, like this is all me, baby. This is all me. Hello from Brazil. I hope you catch this stream from the beginning because I covered the election. Hello, Renato. Michael says YouTube's too busy censoring people to care about it. That's true. This is true. This is why you should follow me. Go to my link tree, get on that Telegram, get on Rockfin at the left lens. Rumble will probably come in the future, but I'm not rushing with a lot of these alternative platforms anymore. I'm on Odyssey too, where all my stuff is backed up. But anyway, with that said, everyone, I'm gonna go. It's good to be with all of you this evening. Yeah, thanks so much for this. What was a pretty well populated stream for last minute and weekend and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'll be back on probably Wednesday, talk about China, Vietnam, and maybe some other updates that are happening politically out there in this struggle. And then I'll be gone for a while. All right, everyone. Good night, and I will see you again soon.